a sourdough made with cheap supermarket flour. So this is strong bread flour from the supermarket. It's slightly different from the more premium brands because it's got less protein in it. So where's protein? Dun, 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 dun. There is, I can't remember, 13.4 grams of protein. I'm guessing that's per bag, but it's 13 grams. Whereas in higher gluten strong flours, you're probably looking at maybe 14 and a half. So to make sourdough with cheaper supermarket flour, you need to use less water. So I can't remember, it's such a long time since I've used cheap supermarket flour. We're going to do two experiments. So we'll make we'll make two loaves. We'll make one with what we're going to say. We'll make one with 200 grams of water, and we'll make one with 225 grams of water. However, so we need a double batch of starter. So ordinarily for a starter, it's 150 grams of flour, 150 grams of water per loaf. We're going to make two loaves, so it's 300 grams of flour and 300 grams of water. Although we'll put a little bit more in because we want it to be plenty of the starter. So we'll put in 350 and we'll put in 350. I'll need a bit more water. There we go, that's the flour. So I've measured that out and that's 300. But we'll need a bit more. So that takes us up to 650, so we just need another 50 grams, and then we know we've got plenty of starter to be making two loaves. The starter always sticks to the bowl, so you always need to make a little bit more, just so you've got enough starter. So, where are we? There we go, 700-ish. This is my old starter, and I've had it for about a year. It needs feeding again today. And so we'll put in 2 dessert spoons, 2 and a bit, because I'm going to have to, end up probably throwing a bit away soon. So we'll put in a little bit more. So there'll be plenty of flavour in that, plenty of yeast to get it going, and then we just need to move that out of the way. We don't want to make a mess of my scales. We just need to mix it up and then leave it to start fermenting and making lots of lovely yeast to make this dough. This might take 6 hours, this might take 12 hours, this might take 24 hours. It's all down to the ambient temperature of the room. There will be someone somewhere who can tell you the best temperatures, but I always just go on when it looks ready. So mixy, so it's all incorporated, and then we'll come back when it's nice and bubbly and it's ready for the next process, which is the process before the kneading. I can't remember what it's called, the next process, but it's where we add the starter to the flour and the water, mix it, and then we'll leave it for an hour to make sure everything all the liquid gets completely absorbed into the flour all properly. So scrape the spoon off like that, leave it like that. Don't need to cover it. Well, I don't think you need to cover it, but there we go. That's it until it's ready. So the starter is nice and bubbly. You can see all the bubbles wanting to burst to the top, and if you just do that, you can see there's lots of bubbles. So that's nice and active. So still the same cheap flour, but I've just weighed things out just to speed things up. So cheap flour. Well, it's not cheap. It's Sainsbury's. Sainsbury's isn't that cheap. Your cheapest place to buy bread flour would be Lidl and Aldi in the UK. I don't know where in the rest of the world, but that's fine. So 2 bowls for 2 experiments, and I slightly changed my mind. I'm going to use 225 grams of water in one of the bread mixers and 250 grams in the other one. I think probably the amount of 225 is going to be about right. So 500 grams of flour in each bowl, 3 grams of salt, 2 or 3 grams of salt, free running salt, not rock salt, because I worry that it never properly melts into the mix. If it's rocks and things like that, it can take time. So 300 grams of starter, It's a slimy, tricky bit of the job is this. And as we're doing an experiment, I really want to get it spot on. So we just need a little bit more. So this process is where we're just going to mix everything together. I'm going to leave it for an hour just to make sure that all the liquid is completely absorbed into all the flour. That. Oh, you swine. Oh, don't you know I'm trying to do an experiment? There we go. Three. I don't know why did it move. That's fine. So 300 in there. Tear it off again, and then we need to put 300 in here. You can, let me stick some out of that. You can activate your starter in a jug or a glass jar, and you can put a rubber glove over the top of it, and you can see how bubbly and how much carbon dioxide it creates. Exactly 300. That's good. I'll save that because I'm going to make some more bread tomorrow. Well, I'm going to add some more. I'm going to make another starter and I'll use that. So, slightly wash off the hands. And then, so this is the 225 in there like that. I've already measured out the water, and this is the 250. So it's just a case of giving it a quick mix just to get it all incorporated, and then I'm going to leave it for an hour, and then all the water will get properly absorbed into the flour, and then that will give us a better loaf. So I'm over to say I'm in two minds whether to show you me kneading for 10 minutes. I'm going to have to do two separate batches of kneading. I kind of think, do you really need to be shown how to knead bread? There's plenty of videos, you can watch all those. So just mix. It be quite shaggy, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be fully mixed, right? So it's smooth. It just needs to be incorporated. And then we'll put a cover on them, and then we'll leave them for an hour or 2 hours. It doesn't really matter. It's not entirely crucial, but certainly want to be doing a minimum for an hour this stage. But you can stretch it for 2 if you've got other things to do. That's fine. So that's kind of what we want to do. Get that off my hands. Try and keep it as scientific as possible. Right, so that's that one. And then we'll mix this one. Should be able to slightly tell if one's wetter than the other one when we're mixing at this stage. I'm just doing this so you can see that you don't have to use. I think bread flour from known brands, it seems to be kind of quite expensive. I don't really know why it's that much more expensive. I'm sure it all comes out of the similar factory and the similar mill, but I don't know. I don't understand too much anymore. I used to think I was quite bright. The older I get, the more I realise that I'm not as clever as I used to think I was. Or maybe I just realise there's more going on in life. Okay, so this one feels dry up. And it's not incorporating as well, but we'll see how the loaves turn out. It's just a different type of bread flour. It's just not as good for making sourdough. So, but we'll see. I always think we can compensate for things. So I don't know. I think you've always got to think about people's budgets, and I think I'm okay with spending maybe £2 on a bag of flour, but it's something I'm interested in. But if the pennies are a little bit tight, and it's certainly come to holidays and you know, you've got better things to spend your money on, like alcohol. I have certainly got money to spend on alcohol. The thought of having to cut corners is probably a good thing. I'm using cheaper flour. So, a bit shaggy mess, but fine. So, we'll put a cover on both of those, leave them for an hour, and we'll come back and knead for 10 minutes of dough. So, yeah, that one's certainly a lot wetter than that one. I'll have to check the video. I can't remember which way I did them. Yeah, it's certainly wetter. That's definitely the one that's got 250, and this has definitely got the 225. I'm sure. I'll have to check the video though. It'd be terrible if I was wrong. Imagine that. Anyway, that's it. Yeah, that's definitely wetter. We'll leave it for an hour, and then we'll come back and we'll give them a knead, and we'll have a bit more of a see how we go. So an hour has passed. Well, slightly over. I got sidetracked. Quick demo on kneading bread. We won't do the no, we won't do the full 10 minutes because you can watch any video that you want on kneading bread. However, we'll just add, which is important, if you are rolling out pastry or kneading dough on a worktop slowly over time, because those things are slightly abrasive, they will dull the surface that you are kneading on or rolling out on. So if you want to look after your worktops, you need some kind of board to roll on, a rolling board type of thing. This isn't an old chopping block. It was cheap in IKEA, a little bit too heavy and impractical for everyday use, but perfect for this because it's nice and heavy. I have it up against the wall, so it's not going anywhere, and I'm going to knead that way, so it's always going to be pushing up against the wall, so it's not going to go anywhere. So it doesn't need anything underneath. So we won't do the full 10 minutes, but we will. Just a quick, what you're doing with kneading is that kind of motion. Technique isn't hugely important. It's more a case of giving the dough a good working, and then you start stretching the gluten and getting it really glutinous. That's the only really important thing. And as long as you put plenty of effort in for 10 minutes doing this kind of movement, it will be enough to get it properly kneaded. So this takes 10 minutes. I'm not going to film it because it just goes on and on. Although I will add, like I said in my other video about bread, the 10 minutes is important. When you do the 10 minutes isn't important. So if you're not used to kneading bread and you can only do 2 minutes, do 5 lots of 2 minutes and have a little bit of a break in between. As long as you do the 10 minutes, or do 5 minutes, have a 5-minute break, and then do another 5 minutes. As long as you do the 10 minutes of kneading, that's fine. I've never been able to get the dough hook properly working on my mixer. I don't know why. I don't know if I'm not using enough dough in the mixing bowl, because it's quite a big mixing bowl. I don't know, and I've never just felt confident that it's done a proper job of it. So I always knead by hand, and it's a little bit of exercise as well. So 10 minutes of this, and it should be ready. And what I'll do is I'll knead this dough, and I'll knead the other dough, and then we'll have a look at the kind of consistencies, what they're like. This one's kind of feeling a lot firmer already. That one will be softer. There's less water in this one than there is in that one over there. So we'll just kind of, and we'll have a look at the doughs once I've kneaded them both. You'll get some kind of idea of how soft they are. But that's kind of quite soft. That might be a little bit. I think that other one is going to make a better sourdough, but we'll see. We'll see in 20 minutes, well 25 minutes, because I think I'll probably have to have a break in halfway in between. But there we go. Both those are kneaded. This is the 225 grams of water. This is the 250 grams of water. As you can see, that one's a lot softer than that one. You know, but we'll see how they go. I don't know. Sourdough, it needs to be a wet dough, and kind of quite unmanageable. So that one will probably make a better dough. But we'll see tomorrow. It's getting late now. It's gonna rise overnight. So it'll double in size, and then we'll knock it back, and then we'll put it in the my bread proving basket. There we go, somewhere in between. We'll put it in my the proving baskets, and then we'll let it ferment, and we'll bake it, and we'll kind of see, and we'll keep an eye. But I think that one's maybe somewhere in between actually. I don't know. We'll see. Yeah, that'll probably make a better dough. But it's quite a difficult dough to kind of mess around with, and it takes a little bit of confidence or not caring, which is sometimes mistaken for confidence. So we'll see tomorrow after it's proven overnight, or it might take a little bit longer. But it'll double in size, and then we'll knock it back and we'll faff around with it a little bit more tomorrow. But it's late, and I want to go. No, I'm not going to go to bed. I'm going to watch some TV. But that's it for the moment. Right, so they have doubled in size, probably just a little bit more than doubled. 16 hours later. It's just the time of the year and the ambient temperature of the room. I'm sure that's the 225 amount of water. I'm sure that's the 250. But we'll see when we knock them back and put them in the proving baskets. Proving baskets are just a bowl with some flat cotton in, like a flat cotton tea towel, nothing bobbly like toweling, just a flat cotton, and then tied with a bit of string so it creates a bowl, and then just dusted with flour. It doesn't need to be strong flour, it can just be plain flour, and then that just stops it sticking to the cotton. You can buy proper proving baskets, but I thought they were rather expensive for what they were, and I just had a couple of cheap bowls and some flat cotton, and I just made them myself. So, but as I always say, you know, you can work your way up how much into it you want to get into. So we'll knock it back. You can see it's nice and aerated there. Yeah, this is definitely the one with less water in. So let's knock it back. It just means knocking all the excess air out of it. So since it's been rising and fermenting for 16 hours, there's going to be quite a good amount of flavour in that. So yeah, that's definitely one with less water in. And then we'll do the same with this one. You can see lots of lovely air bubbles in there. Certainly a softer dough. I'm not going to fancily form it because I can't be bothered. And if you can start forming it into fancy shapes and rolling it and all that kind of stuff and doing impressive things with it, but I don't think there's any kind of need. That can be one of those things that you can work towards. So let's knock the majority of the air out of it. There's still a few air bubbles in it. I think that one's going to make the better loaf. You can smell it as well. It smells really fermented and yeasty. So it's just a simple case of taking the dough and just dropping it into the proving basket like that. We'll do the same in the other. And then I'm actually going to put them in the fridge overnight until morning, and I'm going to bake them in the morning. I could get away. I could just put them in the fridge for like 4 hours, and then what that does is it just gives the, I don't know, I've tried cooking it at this stage now, so I've done this and then I've put it straight in the oven and it doesn't work. It just needs a little bit of time to ferment a little bit more and kind of get a little bit more aerated before you cook it. So 4 hours in the fridge, but I'm going to give one of the loaves away to a friend tomorrow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave them till morning, and then I give her like a completely fresh loaf in the morning. It keeps really well, but I might as well cook them in the morning. So both of them in there. Dust flour on the top, so if something goes wrong and it wants to explode into life, it's not going to stick to the shower cap that we're going to put on the top. No, that's the way around we do it. That's the way I can remember. It's the green one that's got less water in. Where do I put it? Over here. So that over there. So if the dough does want to rise, it's not going to stick to the top of the shower cap, and also the top there is actually going to become the bottom of the loaf. So it's just good to have a bit of flour on, so then it doesn't stick to what you're going to roast, what you're going to bake it on. So I'm going to put those in the fridge, and it'll be 12, 13, 14, about another 16 hours in the fridge, but it's fine. But they will be if you put them in the fridge or leave them in a cool place, after 4 hours you'll be able to bake those. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave those until tomorrow. But that's it for the next 16 hours. Sourdoughs have been in the fridge overnight. This is the one that's got slightly less water in. This is the one that's got slightly bit more water in. They've moved, kind of spread out a little bit. They've risen a little, but not too much. I'm going to cook them in the cast iron pot, I think, because I did an experiment and it worked quite well. But I'm a little bit concerned that they might stick to the bottom, so I'm just going to dust the bottom of the sourdoughs with a bit of extra flour, and then they don't stick. Don't really want to use baking parchment because I think at such a high temperature it might burn and it might want to stick into the bread when it cooks in the oven. So oven's on full whack, so it's supposed to be 250 degrees, but it's on max, and it's on fan as well, and it's been on for a good half an hour, 3/4 of an hour to get really hot. What we're going to do is we're going to turn, imagine that's actually in the bottom, so we're going to turn that out onto like that movement into the cast iron pot. I'll show you me doing it, and then lid on quickly, back into the oven, and then it will rise quickly. Cast iron pot's got pots nice and heavy, so it will retain the heat. Oven's on for a long time. You really need the oven to be hot and to stay hot as long as possible. If you haven't got a cast iron pot, or it's not particularly heavy gauge cast iron, or it's you're just using a normal pan, I would recommend putting a couple of house bricks in the bottom of the oven. They will absorb lots of heat and then give that heat out. When you open the oven door, you'll lose a lot of heat, but those bricks will retain the heat and get the oven temperature back up to where it needs to be really kind of quite quickly. So pause the video, I'll get the cast iron pot out, I'll move one of these out of the way because it'll get a little bit tricky, and then I'll show you what to do, and then in the oven quickly. Right, cast iron pot, you can tell how hot it is because it's wanting to burn my chopping board, so be careful with that. Turn the dough into the pot, careful, plop it in like that. Sharp knife, just a craft one, doesn't have to be anything more. Score across the top, so hopefully we'll get a nice split. Lid on, in the oven quickly. And then that's going to cook in the oven for 20 minutes on full whack, and then we're going to turn it down to about 180 and take it out of the pot, and then that'll set set the crust and bake it through, and then we'll cook it out of the pot, and then it'll crisp up on the outside and go nice and crispy. But that's the first batch, and I'll show you what that looks like when I pull it out of the oven. First 20 minutes is up. Let's have a look. Ooh, impressive. So carefully need to get this out of the pot, and then it needs to go back into the oven on a slightly lower heat. We'll put it at 180. It's got a nice bit of rise on it. Getting out of the pot's a bit of a pain, but using that flour on the bottom worked well. So it's already cooking, it just needs setting. It's the only way I can describe it. The inside will still be raw, and you can't have it on a too high temperature because the outside will be burnt by the time the inside is cooked. So it just needs to go to a slightly lower temperature, and then that will make sure the inside's cooked and the outside isn't burnt and too crusty. Lots of people kind of pride themselves on really crusty bread on the outside. I don't find it that nice to eat, but just a personal preference. So that's it. That's the first one, and we'll look at the second one when we cook that. Both loaves are cooked. When they were baking, I thought that the one with less less water in had risen more, but now as I put them next to each other, that's the one with less water in. No, that's the one with more water in, and that's the one with less water in. And as you can see, the one with more water in has exploded more into life. I'm not going to cook into that one because it's just come out of the oven, and I need to go out, and that's what I'm going to give to a friend. So I don't want to give a loaf that's already cut into to a friend. So she's going to get that one, and we're going to look at that one. So this is the one that was 250 grams of water. That was 225 grams of water. So we'll cut into this one. It's got a nice explosion on the outside. So we'll just kind of see what the crumb-like is inside. But I think it'll have some nice big air pockets. And I think for cheap flour, I think you just need to put a little bit more less water in, and you still get a kind of a good result. So that's slightly out of the way, and we'll have a look at that. And yeah, there we go. I think for what we call it, for a more manageable dough and some cheap flour, I think that gives a good result. Not as good a result as the what we call it though, as the expensive flour with the more water. I think so. I think expensive flour and more water, I think that's a lot better. Although I think now I'll probably want to do an experiment with the cheaper flour and even more water. So the cheaper flour and 275 grams of water, which is what I normally use, and I use more expensive flour. But I think that's another experiment for another day. But I think I might pair that with doing the wholemeal loaf. So, but that's good, you know. So cheap flour and that amount of water makes it's more manageable dough. It's a very wet dough if you use cheap flour and 275 grams of flour. So if it's kind of a work your way up. If I was doing it for the first time, I'd really worry that the dough was too wet. But I think that's a good compromise. Is that not as I'd like more air holes in than that, but that's still pretty good and it'll taste wonderful. So that's it. So that's the experiment with cheaper bread flour from the supermarket. But nice explosion on the top. Look at that. That's really, yeah, that looks good, doesn't it? But there we go. That's it for this experiment. Until the next experiment. I will add, if this is the first bread video that you're ever watching, you can tell bread's ready when you tap it on the bottom like that, and it sounds hollow. That's when you know it's ready inside. So that's it. That's the last bit of the video. Definitely, probably.